Initially, I'd mentioned to Dan this idea about like the group of people who are living in a society, in an idyllic society, where they were pretending to be a family.
We were just looking for something a bit different, something a bit unusual, a bit original, something that we could get our teeth into.
The idea was that it was going to be really silly. It was going to be like a white mum, a Chinese kid and a black kid, and they had a father who was way older than any of them, so it would look like a really mismatched family. It was just meant to be like a bit of a silly idea with a serious message.
The ideas behind it was really good. It was just, when you start looking into it, there was too many factors in it that would have gone beyond the 10-minute realm.
The original idea was perhaps a little bit more of a zombie film, something that perhaps wouldn't have gone down too well at the university. We kind of went back to basics, and perhaps even the idea as it is now is too big for the time frame that we did it in. But we went back to basics, and I began working with Dan, and we discussed, or Dan brought in the idea about a single mum.
Of all the tricks you could have pulled, you can't go messing with people's lives.
Hey, you can't go raising a child alone.
Maybe not in this society.
But where? You got no place to go.
I could tell Toby was getting frustrated because the fact that the idea was slowly shifting away from his original sort of perception of what it should have been.
I think that was the thing as well. I was also trying to sort of get it back to like the really out there idea that I'd initially come up with.
I think the thing that annoyed me with pre-production was the continuous script meetings that we kept having.
Perhaps the idea was a little bit too extreme and a little bit silly for the uni.
The idea was just so radical for the university to grasp that they were very much against us making it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure with the utmost pride to inform you that the great is finally back in Britain. Unhappy families, divorce and disruptive children have been laid to rest in the subsections of history books. Yes, our streets are now free of those unruly youths, the byproducts of unhappy families.
Like many sort of science fiction fantasy films, it had a love story to it, but it wasn't a conventional love story because it was a mother and child, or sort of parent and child relationship.
I guess it was just a case of I was trying to write a character much like the characters you would see in 1984, It's All About Love, and Brazil. Somebody who was an outsider to the system or wanted to break free of the system that they were living in. The only sort of difference that I've done between things like THX 1138 and our film, Nuclear Enforcement, is that I changed the protagonist from a male to a female. And, you know, in order to do something different, again, you know, do something that goes against the grain.
You ended up liking characters, wanting to know more about characters, and I think that was one thing with Toby's script that I felt was really strong. The fact that you had these characters, yet you didn't get to know them immediately. They weren't stereotyped at all, and they all had their own personalities and backgrounds and histories, and you could really get a sense from that just from the way the script was written. None of the characters were sort of two-dimensional. They were all very deep, and it wasn't made obvious.
Look, you're asking too much. I've bent the rules enough as it is. I mean, this could cost me my job.
But I've got rights too.
Henry, you've got no rights. You signed the nuclear enforcement contract.
No, I was forced to sign it.
Well, she's mine now.
I think characters are sort of the hook for the audience, as it were. The characters are the things that are the factors that the audience relate to at the end of the day, and it's the characters that create drama, and it's the relationship between the character and the audience that's sort of key to any film.
I come up with a scenario for the film and the characters come second. In other words, I come up with a scenario so that you have this world where you have all the laws, and then I try and work the characters into that. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is the world of the film is important to me, and the characters come secondary.
With Nuclear Enforcement, locations really, although we was presenting an alternative world, it was still the character stories that, for me, was intriguing, and any emotion that you felt towards the characters was connected to the characters and not to the location.
Look, that really sounds bad. Please let me help. Let me at least buy a bottle of medicine. Don't lose him like I lost my Molly. Don't make the same mistake I did. I know how important they are to us.
Nuclear Enforcement was written in a way that I'd never written before, in as much as the script was written to accommodate the locations that Dan had found. That's something I'd never ever done before.
Well, I became very aware that sort of films that were set in a future either had two versions of the future. They either made it very much technology based, so extreme technology, or they made it apocalyptic, sort of waste grounds. And to be honest, when you look at today's world, it's not really made out of sort of buildings of just today. It's mainly layers of sort of previous time periods.
Way before the script was written, Dan had mentioned to me that he wanted to shoot the film in Southend.
I'd always said to Toby that I thought it was a really nice area,
and I was kind of a bit nyeh. It just kind of seemed like a really, it almost to me seemed like, not quite, but Dan was being a bit lazy in as much as he was going to shoot it at home. And I was never really convinced on the idea until I went down there and initially saw that there was so much down there in terms of versatile locations.
But they had recently had a couple of new buildings, sort of main features the town built in, and they were just so extreme in their look. I mean, you've got the observation tower, which stood out from sort of the old buildings around it, as well as the university as well, which was this giant greenhouse construction in the middle of the town.
It's like you'll walk through one bit, which I think is Leon Sea, and it's an oldie-woldy fishing village, and all of a sudden you've got this great big observation tower, which is what you see in the film. And even there, next to the observation tower, you have like an old Victorian hotel, and it's just a complete mishmash of time periods, which was great.
Costume wise, I felt was very important for the film, and it was one of the ways that I felt brought out the ideas of the fact that it's a future with a past orientation to it. I felt it was that the costumes were sort of the key to it. If we were going to create a futurist or sort of an alternative reality, we really had to show it through the costumes because of our budget limitations. So I therefore focused very much on spending what money we did have actually on getting and creating the best costumes. I did a lot of research actually into sort of 1950s clothing as well as 1960s, 1970s, and I thought, like the locations, we did like a mixture.
When we began auditioning, I initially put just an advert out on Shooting People saying, hi, my name's Toby Fletcher, I'm making something that's a cross between Brazil, 1984 and Pleasantville. I'm looking for someone to play a single mum and a single father between such an age. And I think I put perhaps some sort of contact details on there and perhaps a copy of the synopsis or something like that.
I'd always thought that Toby's script was good, and it was really the bait on the hook that reeled in the actors. But I was I was really shocked by the number of people who applied.
And all of a sudden, gradually, Dan and my emails were sort of inundated with 150 plus responses from both actors and actresses. And it went from there, really. But it was the thing, we ended up being sport for choice. There was so much to choose, or so many people to choose from, that we really did have to start whittling it down, which was not easy, turning people away, but I think Dan and I knew what sort of look and characteristics we were looking for.
Me and Toby worked with Glenn in 2003 with a film called Deuteronomy 5:17, and he played a killer church minister. He was a fantastic actor.
Is that all this is to you? Just a job? You ruin people's lives and then you just go home?
It was the fact that he was such a nice guy, but he could play a villain so well, and it really sort of blew everybody away.
I can't believe you'd even consider something like this. You have a golden opportunity here of starting a family. Something that, well, other people will never have. I mean, how can you be so selfish? Life is not to be taken for granted. It's a gift from God. So you thought you'd come in here and decide who shall live and who shall die on a conversation and a red leaflet?
And we'd kind of remained friends ever since, and as a thank you I wanted to put him in our graduate film.
He was very committed and he was very much on our wavelength, and we, a number of times whilst we were shooting that, we sort of chatted to him about ideas and stuff. So I think when we came to writing Nuclear Enforcement, we very much had Glenn in mind for the part of Henry.
Who's it for?
It's for me.
Don't mess with me, Henry. Remember, one phone call and goodbye, Molly. Breaking nuclear enforcement contract, that's 10 years. Now who's it for?
You'll never be her father.
When I see her again, who's it for?
He brought a vulnerability to it, which again is fantastic to see that range from playing a priest who would stop at nothing, and he was, had sort of several outbursts, to go from being a really aggressive character to being a really subtle character who's put upon was, an exciting contrast. When I was writing the part of Kat, I kind of perceived her being like a really caring, motherly type, like somebody you would instantly look at and, you'd care about her, you'd sympathise with her immediately just from appearance. But Anna instead brought different qualities to the role. To me, she walked in the room and she instantly gave you this impression that she was tough and that she wouldn't take no for an answer, sort of thing. If you were in a fight or something, she wouldn't back down from the fight. And that's something I think that was really good for the part of Kat, because she is somebody who is living rough on the streets and somebody who is determined to stay with her child.
All the tricks you could have pulled. You can't go messing with people's lives like this!
And you can't go raising a child alone.
Maybe not in this society.
But where, Catherine? You've got no place to go.
Do you think I wanted this out of choice? First your husband dies, and then they try and take away your only family. Your only meaning. Great bloody society!
Hey, them's the rules, and I didn't make them.
But you live by them.
You think I want to?
At least you have a choice. So what happens now?
Well, that's entirely up to you. Looks like you've got your choice after all. What about him?
What about him?
You're not going to get treatment for him where you're going. He's not going to get a proper education, a decent childhood. He's lost cause already.
How dare you!
Well, truth first, isn't it? Besides, look at him. You're not going to go much further until you lose him altogether.
You make sure you promise me he gets a good home. Get someone to look at. He needs a good feel inside him.
When I got to saw her audition tape, it was fantastic. It had very much raw passion in it, which just made me think straight away, yes, she's the one. She's Kat. Because the centre of that character is really about passion and sort of love for a child.
I never wanted an actual bad guy in the film because there wasn't a bad guy as such in the films that I'd been watching. THX 1138 and The Handmaid's Tales and Brazil are all about an individual fighting against the constraints of their society. There isn't a bad guy as such. The antagonist is the society itself. So I wanted to try and emulate that, but I don't think, to be honest, in a 10-minute film there was time to get that across. So Dan brought in the suggestion that we have a bad guy, or through even talks over at the university.
Originally we only had Detective Frankland as the other character, and Pano came in and did his reading, and he was very cool, very calm, almost to a menacing sort of standard.
Drinking again, are we, Henry?
And it was fantastic, his performance. It almost struck me as sort of Hannibal Lecter-ish, and that was really the point where me and Toby decided that we needed to introduce a third character to the story, and that's how Phil was developed.
There was kind of a sense of or menace and authority to his performance, and it was almost like his confidence, or the confidence that came across in the way he portrayed the character, was unnerving. I guess it was kind of dark and brooding, and it was something that, instead of it being OTT, it was all subtle, and it was kind of the tone of the voice and the delivery and the look of it that, really grabbed your attention.
We ended up writing the part of Phil, so he wasn't 100% bad. He was just a guy doing his job.
Yeah, that's how I saw him. I saw him as somebody who was doing his job. He was, a man of duty, that he had to do his job, and he had to do his job well.
Do you think I wanted this out of choice?
Well, they're the rules. I didn't make them.
No, but you live by them.
It's my job.
At least you have a choice.
Whatever goes on behind in his head, whatever his personal opinion is about whatever, about his job, about what he's doing, it doesn't really matter. What he has to do is follow the rules. What he has to do is do his job and do it well. He's one of those people who just have to follow instruction in their lives. Some people, they don't even use toilet paper without reading the instructions. and he's doing that. He's following the rules. Yeah, I've always thought that it's much more interesting to play somebody who's not 100% straightforward. And he is straightforward, but he's not. He's got his professional facade that you see throughout the film, and I believe that he's got a whole world behind him when duty's over and he goes home, and he's got his wife, he's got his children, and that's interesting.
We'd always spoken about Nuclear Enforcement being a big film, something that we'd go all out on, and we get like a sizable crew, decent props, decent locations, you name it. We'd really push the boat out, and we try and get as semi-professional or as semi-professional production as we possibly could, meaning that we'd get proper sort of, to an extent, departments in. We'd perhaps get a cinematographer and makeup and things like that.
Couldn't ask for a better cast and crew at all. Each one of the people that we hired for the cast and crew gave 120%. They gave us their time for absolutely pittance money.
We were adamant that we were going to go out and get ourselves makeup artists, and it actually turned out to be one of the most difficult roles to fill, in terms of we couldn't find anybody that was, or we could, but it just proved to be an even bigger challenge than casting the film. And luckily I'd seen Dorinda's profile on, I think, on UK Screen, and it had said that, "Hi, my name's Dorinda. I am a makeup lecturer and also a professional makeup artist. I look for work for myself, but I also look for work for my students," which was a great help because we were getting really stuck at that point. And I think had I realised the distance they were going to travel, I would have thought twice about it. But luckily, I phoned Dorinda up and I found that she was very game and very keen to help out, and that you couldn't have asked for better. She'd got a couple of students interested, and bearing in mind I'd never met Dorinda, she was incredibly helpful, considering all we'd actually done was spoken by phone and by email.
Laura and Layla did a fantastic job with the makeup, and I think that really shows in the film, in terms of you really do end up believing that Kat and Tim have been sleeping on the streets for months. It was just a shame that we didn't get an opportunity to allow them to be a little bit more creative on screen.
First day we got everybody together, for me, was so nerve-wracking.
I went into production pretty much bricking myself.
It suddenly dawned on me that I was in charge of 6 people, some of which I'd never even met prior to that day, especially Laura and Layla, the makeup girls.
I went in very nervous, very, very nervous, because of the scale of the film. I mean, this was a big film, and I've never directed such a big film with such a big cast.
I just kind of all of a sudden felt the responsibility on my shoulders, and it kind of felt a bit daunting, in as much as it kind of felt like everybody was going to turn to me if something went wrong.
And I was also very nervous and felt very much pressured, because I really felt I had to give the script justice. Because as I said, the one thing that attracted all those people there was the fantastic script, and I thought it was a fantastic script, and I was just really worried that my direction wouldn't do that script any justice. So I went in very, very much nervous, but also very excited, because I was really looking forward to it. It was going to be a challenge, and it was going to be a lot of fun.
You know, it was also fun as well because my friend Tom came and did the sound work on the film, and it was kind of, for me, it was this weird combination of people that I'd met from different periods in my life.
The very first day, the day that we did sort of makeup tests and costume tests and rehearsals, the pressure was very much on. There was a lot of things that had been going wrong. The weather forecast wasn't looking good.
The number of like fresh people I've worked with so far, the whole thing stands out. The script, the production, the direction, how organized you were.
Yeah, but it was also exciting. I mean, it was finally, the film was coming together. This film that we'd been discussing for sort of 7 months plus was finally, coming together in one place, and it was finally going to happen.
I mean, the stupid thing is the university forced us to film a location film in the middle of February, which is not exactly the most warmest of months.
In all of my 7 years of filmmaking, I have never been on a shoot where the weather has been so bad. It was unbelievable. I mean, you hear horror stories about professional crews going out and fighting the weather, but it was ridiculous. We had almost like gale force winds.
It rained, it snowed, it sleeted.
It was freezing cold. I think we had hail at one point and some snow, and we kept shooting throughout the whole thing. Meanwhile, me as producer, I'm getting concerned because everybody's standing around getting cold whilst we're trying to get all the scenes done.
It's an experience. I mean, that's why you do this job, and you're not, working 9 to 5 in an office to have fun and have things to tell your grandchildren. That I spent, a long weekend in freezing weather outside by the sea and on the train footpath and in the tall car park on the roof, and that's why you do it, I think, because you keep on playing in the playground way after your 12th birthday. You keep on being an adult and spending a weekend in a bloody freezing weather. It's not something that too many of grown-ups do.
It was just cold, very cold, very uncomfortable at times.
I think it certainly kept everybody on their toes, in as much as we were to an extent trying to move quickly but do the scenes justice at the same time in terms of getting the performances right rather than just rushing through it because it was cold.
When it became like that, the weather became a factor for me and Toby in terms of the pressure that we were on to get the shots done, to get the cast and crew happy.
Am I pleased with the overall film? It's a bit hard to gauge. I think I need a bit of time apart from it because it's kind of spent from, I think, May 2004 till now, which is now May 2005. Talking, thinking, eating, sleeping, having no life outside of nuclear enforcement. I've written the film, I was there for the casting, I was there for the shooting, I then sat in with Tom whilst he edited the film.
I personally wouldn't change the experience that I had making it. As I said, the polish to it is missing, and the time limit that we had, the budget constraints that we had, I don't think the film quite gives the story justice. It's a big idea. It's a bigger idea than a 10-minute short film, with characters in it that are superbly written.
I've seen it so many times, and I am pleased with the film. And what is exciting and what means a lot to me is that I had this really warped idea that I didn't think anybody would get, and we stuck it out on the internet, and we had such a vast, huge response to it. And that's really promising for me, because I kind of felt like before, people said to me, "Oh, your ideas you're a bit weird and a bit out there." I kind of thought they'd only appeal to, maybe me and a couple of my friends, but it goes to show, if you have a wicked idea and you feel passionate about it and it's interesting, people will come to it.
And I think at the end of the day, nuclear enforcement isn't about critics, it's about the audience watching it, because for 10 minutes the audience is taken to a different world and is encountered with characters who are never fully explored, but take you on a journey, and I think that's the key.
It may not be quite what I intended, but the experience is phenomenal and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Nuclear Enforcement is just one stepping stone to a bigger film.